Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right into a really fascinating exploration today about why simply passing correct words from one person to another doesn't actually mean you've communicated the full picture. We're looking at a huge underlying question. How do we carry meaning forward without totally erasing the fundamental differences between us? We often treat communication like it's a simple math equation, but as you'll see, the reality of human connection is beautifully and necessarily a whole lot more complex.
So let's just start by questioning an assumption we pretty much all share. We tend to believe that if we just find the exact right words, if we speak clearly and accurately, the other person is going to receive our meaning perfectly intact. It's a nice, comforting thought, right? But think about your own daily life. How often have you used the exact precise words you intended, only to realize the person across from you heard something completely different? Even when our vocabulary is identical, meaning has this funny way of shifting while it's in transit.
And this happens all the time with everyday words we assume are universal. Take words like family, responsibility, or freedom. We might all share the exact same dictionary definition, but a different lived experience literally equals a different meaning. The word family might mean absolute safety and warmth to you, but to someone else, that exact same word might carry the heavy weight of obligation, or even a profound sense of loss. You can perfectly align the definitions of words, sure, but you cannot perfectly align the personal histories, the bodily experiences, and the cultures that gave those words their weight. Even when we're using the exact same words, we might not be looking at the same world.
To figure out why this happens, look at how we normally picture communication. In the conventional model of transmission, we mistakenly treat meaning like it's an object, kind of like a sealed package. We take our original meaning, pack it neatly into words, ship it across the room, and the receiver just opens it up to extract their understanding. It makes communication look like a flawless overnight delivery service. But the truth? Meaning absolutely does not travel like a sealed package. It's so much more porous and volatile than that.
Instead of a package being shipped, this is what is actually happening. Meaning isn't transported, it is regenerated. A speaker's unique history shapes the words they choose. Those words then travel and make direct cognitive contact with the receiver's entirely unique history, memories, and fears. The receiver doesn't just extract the original meaning. Actually, a totally new meaning emerges right at that point of contact. Because of this, translation, whether we're talking about between different languages or just between two people, isn't about duplication at all. It's about designing a contact surface where meaning can be regenerated.
Now, because meaning is constantly being regenerated at this contact surface, translation always involves loss. And we shouldn't view this simply as a failure. It is just a structural reality of how we talk. Three distinct things get lost. First, information. When we shorten or summarize something, details naturally drop out. Second, context. The physical relationships, the unspoken environment, the literal silence in the room when the words were spoken. But it's the third loss, phase, that is perhaps the most invisible and definitely the most fascinating.
Let's unpack what phase loss actually is. You know, when an idea is first born, it's usually full of hesitation, uncertainty, and active exploration. You're just figuring it out. But as it progresses, that raw, beautiful uncertainty of initial speech goes through editing, becomes polished text, and finally appears as a fixed, rigid meaning. What disappears here isn't just data. What vanishes is the moving, unfinished state of the meaning itself, the reality that the speaker was actively figuring it out in real time. By the time it's documented, it looks like a hard, established fact, completely stripping away the human vulnerability that created it.
Which brings us to a massive crossroads in how we handle communication, contrasting two very different forms of translation. One form aims to remove difference entirely. Institutions, legal contracts, and emergency manuals desperately need this. They have to compress complex realities into a single, clear meaning so everyone can act fast. But it totally erases local context. The other form of translation preserves difference. This one doesn't promise perfectly smooth understanding. Instead, it leaves visible disagreements. It essentially says, hey, this interpretation is tentative, leaving the friction intact. And that friction actually allows us to stay in contact with each other's distinct worlds, instead of just paving right over them.
So the real game changer here is redefining what makes a translation good in the first place. We can look at this like a simple equation. Good translation equals content accuracy plus contact accuracy. Content accuracy is what we usually fixate on, right? Like, did we retain the factual information? But contact accuracy asks a much deeper question. Does the receiver actually have a path to further understanding?
An institutional explanation might be 100% legally accurate, but if it doesn't connect to the lived reality of a real person, if it doesn't leave a door open for them to ask questions, well, it completely fails at contact accuracy. We constantly have to negotiate this tension between getting the facts right and keeping the human connection alive.
And wow, this tension becomes incredibly urgent when we look at artificial intelligence. AI doesn't just translate French to English, it translates across massive structural layers. It turns technical jargon into everyday language, cold institutional rules into lived experience, and past records into present questions. And it does this at blazing speeds. But here is the major complication. AI naturally tends to smooth things out. It fills in the blanks for us. If an AI removes all the friction, the contradictions, and those unspoken gaps just to give us one perfectly readable output, it actually closes the pathway back to the original meaning. It shouldn't just act like a flawless answer machine, it needs to show us what it omitted and where the uncertainties actually lie. Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on today. When we try to understand someone, are we just forcefully replacing their unique, messy meaning with our own comfortable words so we can file them away? Or is true understanding about intentionally leaving room for the incomplete? Perhaps leaving a place to touch again, preserving that gap of misunderstanding as an open door rather than an error, is actually the ultimate condition for continued human connection. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today in this explainer. Take that question with you, and really think about the spaces you leave open in your own conversations.